for control of Congress. And we will continue tonight with the Arkansas Senate debate at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's another key race that people are watching, and as well as the Louisiana Senate race. And we will have that at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on C-SPAN 2. So C-SPAN 1, Arkansas Senate, C-SPAN 2, Louisiana Senate. We're going to turn our attention now to campaign 2014. Joining us is Ilyse Hogue. She's the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Greta.
What's your role that you're playing in this election cycle?
You know, I think we are very, very focused on making sure that we have a majority in the Senate. We've seen so much terrible anti-choice legislation be introduced into the House, but we're also very, very focused on the governor's races. There are 36 seats up at the state houses, and those are really where we're seeing a lot of the damage be done to women across this country. So I've been in a half dozen states in the last month, and there's a lot of energy out there.
Where are you? Why specifically the governors? What's happening on the state level?
So since 2010, we've had a record number of laws passed through state houses that are restricting legal abortion, restricting contraception, restricting a woman's right to choose when and how and with whom she has a family. And the bulk of these are coming at the state level through state houses. You know, despite the fact that polling shows, our own polling, but also Wall Street Journal and NBC, that 7 in 10 Americans actually support legal access to abortion, we only have 3 in 10 governors who support full legal access to abortion. So we're just seeing that constitutional right shrink and shrink at the state level. And so we're watching really key races. For example, I was in Wisconsin this weekend for the Mary Burke-Scott Walker debate. And I think, you know, all eyes are kind of on Wisconsin because not only of what it represents nationally on all of these issues, but also what it means for 2016.
So what sort of resources do you have at NARAL Pro-Choice America? How many people, and where do you focus? I mean, is it money? How do you play the game? Is it money? Is it a ground game? How do you do it?
You know what we do? We do contribute to campaigns where the candidates or elected officials carry our values forward into legislation. But, you know, in the hyperinflated world of post-Citizens United politics, I think we have a lot to contribute through our membership and people power. You know, I was on the doors this weekend canvassing, and I've done it in Colorado, I've done it in Wisconsin, I've done it in Minnesota. I think that one of the things that we see is when the air wars become so crazy, people start to crowd the ads out. And what matters is who's going to take enough time to come sit down with me, talk about the differences in these candidates, make sure the truth gets out there about their record on women's issues, but on the issues generally.
So if Open Secrets has your total receipts for 2014 from your PAC, it's a little over 300,000.
Yeah.
So
comparatively not much. Yeah,
comparatively
not much.
So then how do you get your message across? Because it, you know, people obviously spend money for a reason because it works.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think we've seen that we have been able to run very sophisticated programs that goes right to the voters that we know make a difference in these elections. There's an enormous number of voters who actually believe that these senators, in some cases these governors, are focused on the wrong priorities when they're spending their time and their energy and their political capital restricting women's choices rather than actually, for example, job creation in the state of Wisconsin. And so we've done very sophisticated doors, mail programs. We're on the phones every day. We're funneling our members into these campaigns to make sure that you know, it's the good old game of retail politics. We're going door to door, making sure that these politicians' records are exposed. They can't hide from the issues, and they have to answer the question. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't ever do advertising. We do. In fact, we just went up in Wisconsin over the weekend with an ad setting the record straight as Scott Walker tries to back off his very strong anti-choice record, where he's done more to restrict legal access to abortion than many of the governors in this country. He's actually trying to back away from that. He went up with an ad saying, no, really, it's okay, I'm going to let you choose. And we had one of our members in Wisconsin, a great woman named Miranda, who wanted to set the record straight. We went up with that ad yesterday.
So what about ballot measures this November? And what are you doing to, because there are a number of ballot measures dealing with personhood, et cetera. Explain what they are in what states and how you're trying to push back against those.
Yeah, so there are 3 ballot measures about personhood on state ballots, one in Tennessee, one in North Dakota, and one in Colorado. These are extreme end of anti-choice legislation, essentially granting a fertilized eggs the same legal rights as a full human sitting here like you and me. Many of these measures, if not most of these measures, outlaw common forms of contraception, completely outlaw abortion entirely, and in some cases interfere with IVF, in vitro fertilization choices for families, but also end-of-life decisions. And so, you know, a lot of what we're doing, it's not that different, right? We're actually trying to get the truth and information to voters, particularly voters who might be motivated to go to the polls in an off-year election if they know what's at stake. And so some of this is television advertising, but a lot of it is door-to-door. You know, it takes a little while to explain these things to voters.
Are you concerned that President Obama's popularity is a drag on getting people, you know, mostly Democrats who are pro-choice, out to the polls? And also, in an off year like this, Republicans tend to vote more than Democrats do.
You know, I am not so concerned about President Obama specifically as I am about the overall confidence ratings in Congress as a whole. You've got the lowest confidence in Congress, and I think since they've been recording,
for both
right?
parties.
For both parties, and I think that that does make it a bit of a challenge to get people to go to the polls and vote. Then you've got the voter suppression laws, which even though the court has overturned them, you have to go back to people and say, no, no, really, it's okay, you'll be able to vote now, which is an added layer of complication. But I do think people are engaging more at the state level. That's been my feeling being in the state. People actually understand the role that their governor has. That's heightened now, I believe. And so I think that that's a motivating factor. But one of the things we know are that the issues we work on, the right to legal abortion, the right to contraception, the fundamental right of women to make decisions about how we have families and when we do that, those are driving issues. We know that when we get those issues in front of the voters, when they know what's at stake, that they actually go to the polls. So that's our focus. We do it through mail, we do it through phone calls, we do it door to door, and that's how we incentivize people to get to the polls.
On your ads, here's a headline: NARAL's new campaign goes after politicians obsessed with abortion, you say, pointing to the governors in Wisconsin, Florida, and Kansas.
Absolutely.
Others have said the same about Senator Tom Udall, Democrat in Colorado, that his campaign is a one-note campaign. It's a one-note strategy. He just keeps talking about women's access to birth control and access to abortion.
Yeah, I think Senator Udall, Governor Hickenlooper, Senator Udall is actually on the right side of the public on this one. There's a couple issues with that narrative that we're seeing more actually in the national press than being in Colorado. One is that women's access to our own healthcare decisions is not a single issue. You're talking about 52% of the population, and you're talking about an issue that if we can't make our own choices, there is no such thing as economic equality, there is no such thing as job security if we can't actually have access to full family planning. So I think what Senator Udall understands and what the voters of Colorado understand is that this is a fundamental issue, which is different than a single issue. Now, what our ads seek to point out is that you've got governors like Governor Brownback in Kansas, who has literally spent his entire tenure pursuing an ideological agenda, which is to outlaw those choices for women at the expense of other priorities in the state, like the education system, like job creation, and to the extreme that he has actually spent over $1 million in taxpayer money defending his laws, which are at odds with most people in Kansas.
We're talking about women's issues in campaign 2014 with Ilyse Hogue, who's the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, and the role that they're playing in this election cycle. Let's go back to Colorado. In the Washington Post this morning, Colorado Senate race tests the Democrats' playbook to focus on these issues of women's access. And they note in here that Cory Gardner is becoming a new type of Republican and almost creating an example of how Republicans need to run in the future when it comes to women's issues.
You know, I think Cory Gardner is mostly, to me, the oldest kind of politician, which is that he'll say whatever to get into office, right? This is a man who still has his name on federal legislation that is the personhood legislation we discussed earlier in the show, and yet which would outlaw contraception. And yet on the flip side, he's saying, oh, we're going to make contraception available over the counter, which by the way, the FDA has not even said is plausible yet. I think he's trying to confuse voters and also not discuss the fact that if he could even reconcile those views, which is almost impossible to do, he's still asking women to pay twice. There's still an economic penalty for women who would have to buy birth control over the counter when in fact it's part of basic health care and should be covered by our insurance. So I actually see that as a very old style of politics, to pander on both sides and to get elected and then pursue your own agenda. I'm not sure what's so new about it.
Washington Post this morning, Karen Tumulty's piece says this: all this matters in Colorado because of the women's vote. In 2010, Senator Bennett won in part because of what the exit polls showed to be a 16-point gender gap, one of the largest of any races in the country. Democratic strategists say privately that Udall must do nearly as well. Can he?
Yeah, I think he can. I think he can. You know, again, I think that it's a challenge. It's a challenge to make people feel like their vote matters, but I think he really will. And I think that point, that women make the difference in Colorado, is something that we see all over this country, which goes back to this problem with defining our fundamental health care issues, our fundamental decisions about family rearing to be a single issue. It's not a single issue if it affects over half of the population in a way that actually links to everything else in our life.
Is this strategy, though, working to focus on women when you've got a tight race in Colorado, a tight race in Wisconsin for the governor's race? It's tight in Kansas as well. And in Florida, the Republican is up in the polls a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Is it a strategy that's working? I think we won't know until Election Day. But look, what everyone knows is you cannot win without women because we're more than half of the population. And driving women to the polls means appealing to the fundamental things that matter to us in daily life. And that does mean family planning. That does mean legal access to abortion. But of course, that's not all it means. That's why you're hearing a lot more talk about equal pay, but those things go hand in hand. We cannot have economic security without reproductive health.
Let's get to calls. Robert's been waiting. Waldorf, Maryland, an independent. Hi, Robert. You're on the air. Good morning to you.
Good morning, ladies. Wouldn't you guys have to say that the liberal policies that have given us an open border have brought Ebola here? I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, you look at the.
You know what, Robert? We're going to move on. That's not our topic here this morning. We'll go to Jeremy, Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, a Republican caller. Jeremy, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Thanks for C-SPAN. I just want to say I really support women. I feel so terribly sorry for women who are pregnant and didn't want to be pregnant. And yet so many times everyone is told that, the easy answer is just to have an abortion. And I know that NARAL and Planned Parenthood really supports that. And I wish that both organizations would really start spreading the truth that there's really no such thing as having sex, even protected sex, without consequences. There are dire ones. I will ask you that when was the last time a woman gave birth to a toaster oven or to a cactus plant? Never. It's always been a human being. Some live longer than others. Some are smarter than others. But it's always, from the moment of conception, is a human being. Now, unfortunately, or that it's the way that things go, that the woman, in order for that life to survive, the woman must be willing to carry that life for a time. And that is quite a burden, and I recognize that.
Okay. Ilyse Hogue, I'll have to jump in.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think there's a couple of pieces to what you said. I think our organization absolutely fights not only for legal access to abortion, but contraception, accurate sex education so that young people can make informed choices. All of the studies show that abstinence-only sex education does not work. It actually increases unintended pregnancy rates. But, I think that Robert feels the way many people feel, and I think that's totally legitimate. Lots of people have lots of different feelings about sex outside of procreation, contraception, abortion. I think what most people agree on, which is really critical in terms of talking about these races, is that they would rather their family retain that decision in conjunction with their own faith and their doctor and not have politicians sitting in Washington or a state house somewhere telling their families what to do.
Our phone lines are open. We're talking about the role of women and women's issues in Campaign 2014, so dial in with your comments or questions. Charles, a Republican in Hickson, Tennessee. Go ahead, Charles.
Hey there, C-SPAN.
Morning.
Nice to hear from you. And the Republicans, we don't really care. I mean, I don't understand. Is there women out there that let them call in if they haven't been able to get an abortion? I mean, is there children out there running around that were supposed to be aborted and they're like, I don't know, the women have to take care of them?
Okay, so access.
Yeah, access is a very, very big problem right now. My home state of Texas has seen almost all of the clinics close overnight with the legislation that came through the state house under Governor Rick Perry and the court decision last week. So we are certainly seeing women all over this country being prevented from easy access to health clinics generally and abortion more specifically. And by easy, I mean some of them have to travel 400 miles round trip just to get basic health care and access to abortion services. What we've seen in Texas, unfortunately, is that means that 7% of women who need abortion care are attempting to self-abort. And, you know, this underscores a point that we know from global data all over the world, which is that when abortion is illegal or difficult to access, the number of abortions don't go down, the number of injuries to women and deaths do go up. And so we are really on the precipice of that in our country. We've seen more restrictions on abortion in the last 3 years than we have since the early 70s.
If Democrats retain control of the Senate, what is your priority list for them?
You know, right now, as I said, we've got legislation introduced into both houses that is modeled on the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, actually, which would address some of these state attacks on reproductive health and reproductive freedom. It would say that no woman should be punished because of her zip code, because of where she lives, in terms of access to abortion, contraception. And so that would be our federal priority. We are just seeing too much damage done at the state level, and you know, the will, as I said, of American people is not being served by these extreme governors and extreme state houses. So the Women's Health Protection Act is certainly a very big priority for us. But as I said, we're really focused in the states on undoing some of the damage that's been done over the last few years.
Legally, do you see another route at the Hobby Lobby decision?
You know, legally, I don't know. We are definitely pursuing the sort of state-based versions of the Not My Boss's Business bill in a number of different states. It's certainly still live in the both chambers and at the federal level. I do think we're going to see more court cases. I think we're going to see cases coming up from the states exactly about what your caller asked about, which is access. The Constitution guarantees access without undue burden. And certainly most people, including myself, believe there's significant undue burden put on women seeking their constitutional rights right now.
Let's go to Lewis, Waycross, Georgia, Republican. Hi there, you're on the air.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to ask what the lady felt about male birth control.
I think male birth control is fabulous. I think that anyone who has any ability to access any family planning tool means that every child is a wanted child, that every life being lived is empowered, which is what we care about, that if you have access to family planning, men and women around the world, we see that not only do they individually thrive, but families thrive, communities thrive, even countries thrive. With better family planning access and programs, entire countries' GDPs go up.
Fort Collins, Colorado. James, independent caller. James, what do you make of this Senate fight in your state and the issue of access to birth control, personhood amendments, et cetera?
Well, what I wanted to say is all of the races, the governor race, the senator race, and the congressman, it's working for them. It appears to be. And
why do you say that?
It's because I saw the debate that C-SPAN aired, and when the comment came up, or the issue of Cory Gardner's initiative in Congress, it's H.R. 182 or 1082 or something, and he denied the whole thing. But I've read the issue or the bill that he brought up, and he wanted to criminalize, and he lies about everything, and people know it, and it's hurting him. And so I agree with with Mark Udall and Hickenlooper and Romanoff in the congressional race.
So, James,
So I think
James, you're an independent. Have you voted for Republicans before?
I have.
Okay.
I have. When I was in the Army, when Nixon promised to end the draft, I actually voted for him. And I don't mind saying that. And I'm a true independent, have been all my life.
So is this enough of an issue as an independent, this issue of access and personhood, is it enough of an issue to sway you towards the Democrats?
No, I have a wife, a daughter, and 2 granddaughters. So I know what this means to women. It's not just abortion.
Okay.
It's other women's issues that pertain to them.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think that the caller is resonating, a feeling that I really encountered being in Colorado, knocking on doors, which is, as we talked about before, this is not a single issue. It's pervasive for women and people who have women in their lives that they care about. But I think the important thing about what the caller said is that it goes to character. It goes to character of Cory Gardner, right? And people want to be able to trust their elected officials. And this guy has twisted himself in knots and straight out lied in order to backpedal from his extreme positions because he knows they're outside of the mainstream. He knows most people want that their reproductive health care left alone, family planning to be a family decision. And in order to sort of get out of the extreme positions he's taken, he's flat out lied. And that really undercuts trust with the voters.
What about this recent debate between the two where Cory Gardner asked Senator Udall if he opposed making contraception available over the counter, a position Gardner has taken, and Udall wouldn't answer the question?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened with Senator Udall there. I think, there is a very big challenge because it's not that it doesn't sound great, and we care very much about expanding access for contraception. It is the fundamental problem with that is that because the Affordable Care Act, for the first time ever, meant women don't have to be punished for getting that prescription because their insurance will cover it. What Cory Gardner is trying to do is say, A, we'll make it over the counter. Well, he can't snap his fingers and make it over the counter. The FDA hasn't even suggested making it over the counter. But B, he's saying women should have to pay twice for it. And I know that Senator Udall has been a huge proponent of making, as we say, being a woman not a pre-existing condition through the Affordable Care Act. And simply saying, let's make this over the counter is saying, women, you're being punished again for being a woman. You have to pay twice for your health care, which is what, this Congress worked so hard to eliminate through the Affordable Care Act.
We'll go to Mark next. Clearwater, Florida, Democratic caller. Hi, Mark, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for taking my call. Just a quick statement and a question, please. First of all, it's abortion is what we're discussing here this morning. And when the Democrats had both parties in the presidency, they didn't discuss this issue or pass one single law to help this issue. It only comes up during campaigns because they go towards the heartstrings of the American people. But she made a comment that she stated that women are getting hurt more. And I'd like to know where she got that information so I can look it up and see if women are being hurt more because they don't have access to birth control, which is at every CVS, Walgreens in the world.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, there's a number of different studies that show that when abortion is hard to access or made illegal, injuries and deaths go up. The World Health Organization has one, the UN has one. But the one I was specifically citing in Texas was done by Dan Grossman at IBIS Reproductive Healthcare, and you can look that up. But I would actually challenge the caller's premise because we are not just talking about abortion access, although that would be enough since 7 in 10 Americans believe that abortion should be legal and the decision should remain with women and our families. What we are seeing with people like Cory Gardner is that abortion is a piece of a very extreme agenda, right? And that extreme agenda includes granting same rights to women to fertilized eggs as they do to women, which again would result in outlawing certain kinds of contraception, having a domino effect on end-of-life decisions, in vitro fertilization. There is a particular ideological agenda that drives people like Cory Gardner, Sam Brown back in Kansas that is really out of step with mainstream values. It's about legislating a kind of morality around family life that fundamentally Americans believe is part of why we live in a free country, so that we get to define what family is for ourselves.
We'll go to Texas. Tom is a Republican watching us there. Hi, Tom. Good morning to you. You're on the air.
Good morning, C-SPAN. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I was just wondering if a test is created that can determine if a child in the womb is a homosexual, would your guest and other fringe abortion enthusiasts object to abortions of those homosexuals? And if so, on what basis?
You know, I don't think that that exists, and I'm not particularly interested in dealing in hypotheticals. I am from Texas as well. Hi, Tom. I'm a fourth-generation Texan. And I think those hypotheticals that are not actually grounded in reality is the kind of things that drives the extreme legislation that we've seen take over my home state in Texas and is hurting women. Most women facing unintended pregnancies have very valid and personal decisions, reasons that drive them to make that decision. And what the government has ruled, what the court has ruled, is that that's a private decision-making process, and that the Supreme Court has said the state has no business in regulating that, and that's what we're about.
Judy's next. Pauling, New York, Republican. Hi, Judy. You're on the air.
Hi, Greta. Well, I have two statements I want to make. Why is there the need to play on women's emotions for money and the push for pro-abortion during elections when abortion is legal in the United States? And why can't women buy condoms if they want to have sexual relations? They're the least expensive form of birth control and most needed to prevent sexual diseases.
I think that the question about abortion remaining legal, contraception being accessible, are very fundamental questions that do have a very clear place in our public discourse, and particularly around our elections. Like I said, we've seen a slew of restrictions passed at the state level. There have been a number of bills introduced in the House at the federal level that would restrict a woman's right to choose her own family planning method, restrict her access to have a safe and legal abortion. So I think these are legitimate issues that people want discussed alongside many other issues in determining who they want to vote for. Lots of women do buy condoms. The question is, why shouldn't women have access to the broadest range of effective tools to support our reproductive health care? And that is something that I believe deeply every woman should have access to, as much health care as we need, as much family planning as we need, so that we can live healthy lives and make every pregnancy an intended one.
Vivian is next in Texas, Democratic caller.
Good morning. You know, what bothers me the most is, you know, I have friends that are Republicans and everything, and they're post women, they're police women, and even the reporters I see, none of them got there by themselves, but they are angry at the 60s protesters, and the protesters, they think protesters are this or that. None of them got there by themselves. It was women getting thrown in jail for voting and spit on and force-fed. It was women protesting for their rights and things like that that got them there. They didn't get there by themselves, and yet they belittle people that help to get them there. I mean, there are women that burn their bra, as silly as that may sound today. It got them where they are today.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt there's been a long fight for civil rights in this country for women and anyone who's not sort of traditionally holding power. And I couldn't agree more with the caller that, you know, whether you have chosen to become a post woman, as she said, or whether you're, you know, on the pathway to be a corporate CEO. Certainly those who came before us fought for the right to vote, fought for access to the marketplace, deserve a lot of the credit. But underlying all of that, which these women knew, is our ability to control our own reproductive health if we can't choose when we have children and with whom, all other choices are actually closed off to us. And by the way, this has not traditionally been a Democratic issue. In fact, back to Colorado, the very first state to liberalize abortion in 1969 before Roe was Colorado under Republican Governor John Love, followed by Republican Governor Rockefeller in New York. And so this has traditionally been a transpartisan, bipartisan issue because it's one of fundamental human rights. And what we see is still at the rank and file, when you still go out and you ask people whether they identify as Republican, Independent, and Democrat and how they feel about legal access to abortion, this is still a bipartisan issue. It's only at the elected official level that it's become so polarized.
We have a few minutes left here with Ilyse Hogue. She's the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. You can go to prochoiceamerica.org for more information about their group. We'll go to Sonia next in Niceville, Florida, independent caller. Sonia, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Listen, thank you for C-SPAN first, and I appreciate your guest you have on the air right now. I am a retired Air Force military or Air Force vet coming in, more dominantly. I basically work more in a male-dominated career field. And I guess my issue, are you still there?
Yeah, we're listening, Sonia.
Okay. I do appreciate the previous caller that was discussing, the women's activism from the previous decades. Because without them, I didn't get where I was at, throughout my military career. On the women's issues, though, I do appreciate, I'm kind of more independent, more libertarian type view, stay out of my business. I don't like government in it at all. But at the same time, I do have, your guest was going on about this is a bipartisan issue. I do differ on that. It's not a bipartisan issue. It's a human issue. And I just want to make the point. It's there's a lot of Democrat against Republican back and forth, and I got to tell you, a lot of us independents are more libertarian. We're basically tired of that because it's not one way or the other. Those are issues that are facing everybody.
Okay, I'm going to have to leave it there and have our guest jump in.
That sounds like a great last word to me. I couldn't agree more. I do think these are fundamental human issues, and where people agree, 7 in 10 Americans agree, is as fundamental human issues. They belong with us as individuals, with us as families, and not with politicians somewhere in a state house or the federal capitol.
Let's get in one more phone call for you. Jack is in Providence, Rhode Island, a Democrat. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, good morning. I'd like to discuss with your guest something that's like, I think, in the shadows. It's conservative women. Like, for example, she seems to be a very strong candidate, Joni Ernst, out of Iowa. I don't really believe your organization is supporting her. And other conservative women, like in the past, Sarah Palin, Michelle Bachmann, who I think is retiring. But
Jack, are you wondering why they don't support Republican women?
No. I'm not wondering about that. I'm wondering why overall it's not really more prevalent in the news cycle. This is my concern. Like Joni Ernst, for example, that woman is a patriot, okay? She's smart, she's a patriot, and she's got guts, all right? And she's totally honest, and I just don't understand why she doesn't get more support. I believe she's going to win that election. I sincerely hope so. But God almighty, smarten up.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually support, as candidates, both men and women, and as long as they share our values and the values of most Americans, which is to make reproductive health care accessible, just keep decision-making with women, families, and our doctors, they got our support.
Ilyse Hogue, thank you for talking to our viewers this morning.
Thank you, Greta.
By the way, again, go to prochoiceamerica.org for more information. Appreciate it. Coming up